documentaries are cover-ups or helping the cover-up. TV news stories, newspaper stories have all helped cover up the facts about Madeleine McCann. Celebrities, we've had David Beckham involved, J.K. Rowling, Richard Branson, some of them perhaps unwittingly. Charities, the Missing People charity. Pop culture, I read that Kate McCann was going to be on Britain's Got Talent. I don't know if that's true. A fake police investigation, Operation Grange, helped cover up the facts about Madeleine McCann. We've also had politicians involved. So we've had David Cameron involved, we've had Gordon Brown involved, Theresa May involved. But the most important politician with regards to the Madeleine McCann case, in my opinion, Gordon Brown. I think he's very closely linked to this case. Now then, I mentioned TV dramas. If you watch the news, predominantly the news is speaking to your conscious mind. It's trying to persuade you of events or a narrative. TV dramas will speak to your subconscious, right? So this drama, The Missing, which is now in its second series, all about a child that went missing on a foreign holiday, they're planting seeds and suggestions into your subconscious. So this one simply is saying young children are at risk of abduction in foreign countries. And I think this series has been made all because of the Madeleine McCann case, and that's the message they're trying to get in the public's mind. Recently, we had this one about the faked abduction of Shannon Matthews. So her mother, Karen Matthews, in 2008, faked an abduction because she'd seen how much money the McCanns were making. Here she is at the police press conference. Now, the subliminal message that I believe was being planted in people's subconscious with this drama, it's not possible to fool the police with a hoaxed abduction, because what this drama portrayed is how dumb Karen Matthews was and how clever the police were and how quickly they saw that she was trying to fool them, right? So it's not possible to fool the police with a hoaxed child abduction. They don't happen, but I believe they do happen if you can call in favors. And people have said that they think that the McCann, protection of the McCanns is all about class, that because they're middle-class doctors, they've had help. Bollocks. I don't believe that at all. I believe that there's a big, dirty secret at the center of the Madeleine McCann case, and if that same secret had been at the center of the Shannon Matthews case, they would have had the same protection. It's about the secret. It's not about class. The class issue is a phony bone of contention to distract you. Now, I just wanted to bring your attention to this story, which appeared on the BBC website. So this happened last year, 2016, and it was an alleged abduction of a little toddler, a little girl, from a Primark store in Newcastle upon Tyne. So what's alleged to have happened is two teenage girls have come in and led the toddler away. Now, when this story broke, I was being contacted by a woman from Newcastle upon Tyne who lived near where the mother was supposed to have lived, and she was telling me that she thought the whole thing was a fake story, because the mother hadn't been named, and no one in the locality knew who it was. The child hadn't been named, the teenage girls hadn't been named, and there was no CCTV being released. So there's no evidence which proves this case exists, or there appeared not to be. So I don't know if this is a real case. I don't know if it's a training exercise. It might be a real case, but it's certainly been used for purposes of propaganda, because this sort of PowerPoint presentation the BBC put together on their website, there must have been vast amount of work gone into this. It's a whole sort of sequence of slides that you click on, and some of them have got video and audio in them. It's not just a normal news item. So they've spent a lot of time working on this. If you click on slide number 1, we see here the 101 non-emergency call taken by a handler, Kate McCafferty. Kate McCafferty, yeah. Now, there may well be a woman called Kate McCafferty who works at that call centre, but I suspect they've put that name in there just so that the name Kate McCann pops into your subconscious, so that you're thinking of the McCanns while you're looking through the rest of the propaganda in these slides. And the message, or subliminal, which came across for me with this item was, the police are so efficient in the UK, child abductions are prevented. Because what happened here, allegedly, is that the police got the CCTV footage, they found out which direction the little toddler had been taken in, and then they rescued her. So if only Madeleine had been abducted in Newcastle, we would have saved her. That to me is what they're trying to plant in people's subconscious with this. And similar cases have been used. This is the Ben Needham case from 1991, 26 years ago. But it has many parallels with the Madeleine McCann case. It's a little toddler going missing. in a Mediterranean resort, British family. And the other thing in common is that the local police were suspecting the family as being responsible for the child going missing. Now then, this is Ben Needham's mother, Kerry Needham, who was plastered all over our media last year. You may remember it, crying her eyes out because they supposedly found out new information about the case. Now, there are two things really to point out about this case. The first is the circumstantial evidence and what most likely occurred. And the second is how it was used for purposes of propaganda. So let's just go through the first. Kerry Needham here was not with her child. This is a 21-month-old baby. She was at work. The child was at a farmhouse with the grandparents, Kerry Needham's parents. Also there was Stephen Needham, Kerry Needham's brother, Ben's uncle. And there was another guy there who was the landlord of the property. So they're all at the farmhouse when Ben goes missing. Now, Stephen Needham, Ben's uncle, 17-year-old, had regularly been taking Ben out for rides on the back of his moped, right? So the circumstances of when Ben went missing were Ben was playing outside. Stephen Needham leaves the farmhouse on his moped. Nobody sees him leave. The parents, a little while later, come outside. They see that Ben's not there. So they both assume that Ben has been taken for another ride on the back of his uncle's moped. Stephen Needham, Ben's uncle, didn't surface for 3 hours. He was gone for 3 hours, and when he got back, there was damage on his motorbike, right? And he jumped straight in the shower when he got back, right? So the Greek police were running their investigation. They suspected that Ben had died in an accident and that Stephen Needham had disposed of and hidden the body. This is Stephen Needham here. Now, I put a link on my website to a documentary that was made about this case in 2000. And a Rich Planet viewer emailed me, a very observant Rich Planet viewer, telling me that Stephen Needham is exhibiting duping delight in this documentary. Anyone know what duping delight is? Yeah? So if somebody lies to someone and that person buys the lie, the person giving the lie will sometimes show pleasure or they'll smirk because the person's bought the lie. So in this part of the documentary, he's explaining how he gets back from his motorbike trip and then they ask him, well, have you got Ben?
I was out still in the shower. He knocked on the shower door and says, have you got Ben? Have you got Ben with you? And I just said, no. And could hear him going, oh my God.
So why is he smirking? Look at that. He's smirking because the interviewer is believing him. So there's not much doubt in my mind what happened in that case, right? But it doesn't matter. It's a 26-year-old case. It's ripe for purposes of propaganda. So the Yorkshire police sent out a team to Kos to dig a hole in the ground and convinced Kerry Needham that some Greek digger driver who died in 2010 had somehow killed her son and disposed of the body. I'm not aware of any evidence which proves that, but they convinced her of that and they had her bubbling her eyes out all over our mainstream media. That's what they were doing it for. They're not trying to solve the case. So this is the subliminal which came with this case, in my opinion. Families of missing children are always blameless. Kerry Needham was portrayed as blameless and needs sympathy, not scrutiny. So what I think they're doing with this story last year is basically, this is Kate McCann. Okay, we come on to the issue of fake news. How dare they? How dare Jon Snow and the mainstream media point their finger at other sources of information and claim that it is fake when you consider all of the fake stories and news that they've been putting out for decades? Look at 9/11. Just 9/11, one issue, and the amount of lies they've told about it. And they're pointing their finger at other people who try and put out information. So what's this all about? Why are mainstream media doing this? Why have they started pointing the finger at other people when the microscope should be on them? Well, let's have a look at this research. This is a Gallup poll of trust level of mainstream media. So in 1997, we see that 53% of people trusted mainstream media. And in 1999, it was 55%. So well over half. Now, it's below a third, 32%. Less than 1 in 3 people now trust the mainstream media. And I think they're very, very concerned about this. And we can ask the question, well, what have we had over the last 20 years that's possibly achieved this? Well, I would suggest the internet. I think that the internet has allowed people to question and have a platform to oppose mainstream media, which is why I suspect that the trust level has gone right down. But it's a bit more sinister than that. It's a bit more sinister. I got this off Neil Sanders, called JTRIG, the Joint Threat Research Intelligence Group, and other programs feed false information into cyberspace, create false leaders and gurus, and discredit others through concocted stories, sock accounts, and government-paid trolls. They use the principles of deny, disrupt, degrade, and deceive. Among the core self-identified purposes of JTRIG are two tactics. One, to inject all sorts of false material onto the internet in order to destroy the reputation of its targets, and two, to use social sciences and other techniques to manipulate online discourse and activism to generate outcomes it considers desirable. So they're planting fake information, fake news on the internet, and then the mainstream are pointing their finger at it, saying how terrible it is, when, as I say, the microscope should be on them. And the government are even launching an inquiry into fake news. But I don't see how this can work, because let's just say this Commons Select Committee recommends that we pass legislation so that it now becomes a crime to put fake news onto the internet or onto any platform. So you can be locked up for making fake news. Surely we can get all the executives at the BBC locked up, and ITV, and Channel 4, just by going through all of their 9/11 information or 7/7 information, complete fake news, right? I do hope if they pass legislation, they're not going to try and make it only applicable to the internet. I will be complaining vehemently to my MP if this is what they try and do, if they try and exclude television and print media from this. Okay. Now, if we just consider the internet and go back 20 years, it started as a collection of websites. So if we imagine the websites of these green circles, we had millions of users, which are these pink dots. So you would log on to your website and you would get some information. Okay, and there were many websites. Some websites became search engines, so they indexed all of the other websites so that it was easier for people to find them. But this is what the internet has now become. This is what it has become. The vast majority of people who use the internet now get most of their information from a tiny handful of massive corporate websites. Some people who go on the internet now, they only use Facebook. They think the internet is Facebook. I've spoken about Google in the past and how it doesn't publish its algorithms, and I believe its algorithms are heavily weighted towards pointing people to mainstream sites. 95% of web traffic comes from page one of Google, and page one of Google is almost always sends you to a corporate site. So they're keeping people on the small number of massive corporate sites. We've got Wikipedia, which is very heavily censored. You might say, well, YouTube, that's not controlled or censored. Well, if you're posting videos of how to make pizzas, they're maybe not going to censor it. But I had a very important 9/11 video removed recently. And this whole concept of viral videos, that anyone, if they make a very interesting video, it can go viral. I don't believe that at all. I believe every video that goes viral is selected by YouTube and it's promoted by its own algorithms. So in other words, YouTube are massaging what the masses are getting to see on there. So it's subtly being controlled. So the more hurtful or truthful information, I think, is not appearing on those right-hand panels when people do searches on Facebook. You might say, well, no, hang on, there are some good independent websites. And you'd be right, there are. So let's put a few of them on. So I'm sure many people in this audience don't just use these websites. They will go to other independent websites and get their information. But the point I'm making here is that the agenda has been to get as many people into this cattle pen as possible, right? So they're not using or finding out alternative information. And they're building, this is a Facebook server establishment to house their servers proposed in Ireland. They need thousands of these servers. This shows you the amount of usage that Facebook have. And just to point out that if you go to the Rich Planet website, you will see some programs that we did all about Facebook with Neil Sanders. The fact that Facebook was probably set up in cahoots with the CIA, all of the bad behaviors that Facebook deliberately encourages, the online slacktivism as well. You think that you're achieving something by being on Facebook? Why are you? Okay, now then, I just want to talk about TV comedy now, because if we've got all these falsehoods and all of these lies in our mainstream media, then satirical TV comedy can be used to oppose it and expose it and make it look ridiculous, right? But how come we don't ever get any decent satirical TV comedy now, challenging all the bullshit in our news? Anyone notice this? That the comedy is just shit on TV? Does not really challenge what it could do. Now, I've thought about this, and in my opinion, there is an unwritten rule of TV comedy that every TV comedian follows. Here's the unwritten rule of TV comedy. You may satirize the news, but never its veracity. You're not allowed to make jokes about whether the news is true or not. Because if you do, you will immediately be branded a conspiracy nut. And all comedians obey this rule. So programs like Mock the Week, I could provide them with so much material, right? They never take on board. So for example, we had the RAF Marham incident, where an RAF guy was jogging and two terrorists supposedly tried to abduct him, right? And then a few months later, they said, oh no, we think it was just a road rage thing, right? You could have a field day with that story if you satirized it, taking the piss out of the news, because that's clearly fake news. But the first story, they did a whole Crime Watch program on it, and many, many other issues. Now, one guy that used to question whether the news was true and whether it was lying to us is Bill Hicks, who unfortunately, one of the world's best comedians, died in 1994 at the age of just 32. Now, I found an old interview of Bill Hicks speaking not long before he died, and he's talking about how he had this comedy career and he eventually got on TV, but they started telling him that he had to change his material. And so much of what he says in this next clip applies over 20 years later today.
When I was a kid, starting out, I would watch TV and I'd go, boy, if they like that guy, I was looking at comics, if they like that guy, they're going to love me. And that was the impetus that led me to work on comedy and start and continue. And then you get out to Los Angeles and you come to the cold realization that from that kid's wish, boy, if they love this guy, they're going to love me. They don't want me. They don't want you if you have an idea that doesn't correspond to their propaganda. The 90% of it is puerile scat propaganda from the corporations to make us stupid. I kind of feel like everyone has a voice of reason inside them, and I believe that's been quelled to a large degree by our multimedia society that we live in. But anything that defies my voice of reason comes out, and you hold it up to the light of reason. That's the premise. And then you start nailing it, and those are the jokes. Because people are frustrated not having their voice of reason confirmed. And everyone has that voice of reason that goes, this is bull, man, what I'm watching is bull. And yet, the media does not confirm it. So after a while, people begin to think they're insane. And that's the bummer about it. But that's why I love non-mainstream stuff, because you actually hear honest emotions. And that's what you won't hear on mainstream TV ever, is honest emotions. There is a huge audience of disenfranchised people who look at mainstream entertainment and pull their hair out. Bill, we love you because you're so edgy and hip. But when you come on our show, could you not be that way? And I made the mistake of doing it, thinking that, oh, well, you know, I'll rewrite everything so it fits. And now I have no interest in doing that whatsoever. That there's this agenda in mainstream media, and I think it's fairly easy to back this up, to keep people stupid, docile, and apathetic, and therefore the elite who own these corporations and the families that own the corporations, even fewer people, their agenda is to keep us stupid and apathetic.
Okay, you've just got to compare Bill Hicks with this guy to realize there's something not right. And as I say, they will never satirize the veracity of the news. And if your local authority, your local government library has got a poster up of a comedian, you know there's something wrong. These are government-approved comedians. Okay, Now, I've spoken about the internet and how it's become contrived and mainstream media and how it's controlled. So let's say you want to get away from those influences. You're going to go out your front door and walk down the street to try and get your information from elsewhere. Where might you end up? Well, you might well end up in the pub. I go to the pub. Can anyone give me the name of Britain's biggest pub chain? Wetherspoons, thank you. Wetherspoons has just under 1,000 pubs. Now, if we imagine that about 2,000 people each week goes into each Wetherspoons pub, that's 2 million people each week. Now, that's as many people going to Wetherspoons as buy a mainstream newspaper. Anyone noticed this? This is a photograph of my local Wetherspoons. This is in Merthyr, right? Anyone notice this? They always have the news on, and it always seems to be BBC News with subtitles. Now, I got quite pissed off at this. Every time I go out my house to go to Wetherspoons, why is the BBC News on? I came out to get away from that. So I pointed out to Wetherspoons that they're promoting propaganda. BBC News is propaganda. I don't think anyone can argue with that. Why would Wetherspoons want to promote propaganda? So I wrote to them and complained, why do I always see BBC News on? This is what Wetherspoons said in their email. When our pubs are not showing major sporting high-profile events on the TV, they will show BBC News, right? So there it is there in black and white. It is Wetherspoons' policy to promote propaganda, the worst type of propaganda, and it is their policy to promote it. So I asked them, why is it your policy to promote this? This is what they said. It is an operational decision based on a number of factors. That's disconcertingly vague, as Alan Partridge would say. So I asked them a more specific question. Has your company been given any financial incentive or other incentive to follow this policy? And they refused to answer that question, right? Now, you might know that Wetherspoons also have another policy, which is a no music policy, right? Sometimes you'll go in Wetherspoons and you hear the buzz of conversation, right? They've got a no music policy. What are people going to be talking about? The BBC News. So they're going to be discussing the news, but in a BBC context, yeah? So it's absolute promotion of propaganda. You're talking possibly 2 million people every week watching that shit. Now, I don't usually drink in Wetherspoons. I drink in a pub next door, a few doors along. But there's a guy who does drink in Wetherspoons. I've seen him through the window, and he sits there for about 3 hours, absorbing all the mainstream shit into his head. And then just before last orders, he gets out of his chair, and then he walks into my pub, like a Morlock from H.G. Wells' Time Machine. And he sits down next to me at the bar and proceeds to tell me everything he's just seen in Wetherspoons on the screen. And I came out to get away from the TV, and I didn't even go into Wetherspoons. So the point is the information is going further than just Wetherspoons. Anyone notice that Wetherspoons seem to have all the best listed buildings in the UK? Now, the Wetherspoons in Merthyr was a furniture shop, okay? The guy didn't have it for sale, and he was offered £1 million for it. He said, no, I'm not selling it. And Wetherspoons upped the offer until he sold it. Now, £1 million. And they've got, what, just under 1,000 pubs. So that's nearly £1 billion. £1 billion to create the whole Wetherspoons chain, which started in 1979 in London. With this guy, Tim Martin, here he is with a cabinet minister. Here he is with 3 cabinet ministers. So the question I ask is, has Tim Martin been given a helping hand in order to create his empire, right? I don't know that he has, but it's a huge, rapid, expansive business from 1979 in London to what he's got now, right? And I know a lot of landlords that they just can't understand how Wetherspoons can beat them on price, etc., right? So if Tim Martin has been given a leg up by the global elite because he's promoting BBC propaganda, if he has, right, that means that Wetherspoons aren't pubs. They're not pubs. They are propaganda houses disguised as pubs. So next time you go into Wetherspoons, insist that they turn that BBC off, please. So there are many arms to the octopus of propaganda, and I think pubs is one of them, or at least Witherspoons. All right, let's just talk about money and the economy, because money is something which influences people's lives massively. And the mainstream media never ask the right questions about money, like how is money created? A very simple question which you will never see discussed on mainstream because it hides the global elite, basically. So money is magicked out of thin air by the central bank, Bank of England, or the Federal Reserve in the US. It's not worth anything, right? It's fiat currency. It's then loaned to the government at interest or loaned into the economy by buying other loans. And they get interest on all that money they've created out of nothing, right? It's a complete con. And it brings about the next question that they never ask, which is debt a planned control mechanism or a random accident? I say it is a planned control mechanism. I learned that Merthyr Council have got debts of 68 million now, but some of those debts go back to the 1980s and are being paid at 9%. Now, what that means is that Merthyr Council is not really in charge of its own decisions because it has this legacy of debt. So if someone's loaned them money in the 1980s, do they not want that money back? What it shows you is that lending is not there to sort out problems of liquidity, short-term shortages of money. It's there for the long term. And the best way to disempower someone is to get them in debt, whether it be a person, a local authority, or even a government. And that is the purpose of debt, in my opinion. I mean, think about it. We've got record debt, but we've also got record consumption, right? How does that work? What that tells you is that there's no real intention to pay the debt back. So the debt is there as a disempowerment thing. It disempowers you if you're in debt, as it does with Merthyr Council, because they're borrowing more money for new projects, but they're not really in charge of the decision of what that money's been spent on because they're borrowing it from someone. So your council is not even the council anymore. Okay, now let's just say we sorted out this system that we have, this debt-based monetary system. And to do that, you'd have to get rid of the Bank of England, allow the government to issue currency without debt attached to it. Everyone in this room would immediately be better off, right? The few people who would not be better off are the people who run and hide behind the Bank of England. Now, if we did that, there's still a problem. There would still be a problem, and this is it. It's not so much to do with money, but it's more to do with how people's behaviors have been managed over the last 50 years. What does money actually control in your life? Get rid of money, right? In other words, get rid of it out of the equation and ask what money controls and consider those things, not the money itself. So money controls your time because you have to spend time at work in order to get money. You also have free time. Money controls your stuff. We all need stuff to survive. We need food, we need water, we need shelter, and that's stuff that you need. There are also many other things that we consume that we don't need. This is stuff that you want. So your money will control your stuff and your time. Now, over the last 50 years, this has been the agenda to try and make people more greedy, to increase the amount of stuff that they don't need in their lives, to increase their consumption. But what increasing the whole nation's consumption does is it pushes this line down. Because as a society, we have to work more in order to meet that consumption. Okay? Now, you would imagine in the last 50 years, because we've had such great increases in technology, that people would be spending less time in work. But that hasn't happened. It hasn't happened because consumption has increased exponentially. So it's promotion of greed, essentially, we've had over the last 50 years. And it was epitomized by this statement by Zbigniew Brzezinski. Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was an advisor to many different US administrations over the last 50 years. And this is what he said. The challenge for governments in the future will be to prevent man from effectively discovering his true self and keeping humanity locked into consumerist materialism. He said that in 1969, right? So what he's saying is we're going to promote greed in everyone so they overconsume, and when they do that, they'll be locked in work and they'll then not be able to think for themselves because they'll have no time left. So this is what we end up with, very little free time. We're chasing our tails. And all political parties promote this. Every political party says we need to increase consumption in order to get rid of the debt. It's a complete, just ridiculous argument. And how does this fit in with this new concept they're shoving on us called sustainability? How can you have sustainability when you're increasing consumption all the time? My argument is that people should be given a choice. So if you want to work till you drop in order to obtain as many material possessions as you can, you go and do that, mate, right? But people should be shown that if they live a more modest lifestyle, then they will be able to reduce the amount of time that they work, and they will have more time where they will discover who they truly are. But we have problems in that they're always trying to fool people into new ways of spending their money and increasing this box here. Just watch this.
Welcome to Love Your Garden. I'm here to meet a family in circumstances the like of which we've never encountered before.
Philip passed away just a few weeks from his 41st birthday.
I'm here to tell Sam that even though Philip is no longer around, I want to make for her the garden that he hoped we would. So this garden, small though it might be, has to fulfil a lot of things for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So what will it mean to you, this garden?
Everything.
Every detail of this space needs to be perfect. Because we're building it in honour of a man who always wanted a special garden for his special family. A hot tub small enough for our garden is being put into place. And right next to the tub, the walls of Francis's garden building have also appeared.
Love that little dip in the hedge. So look. You think you'll ever get over it?
I don't think I'll ever get over losing him.
But remembering those who are no longer with us is very much a part of the healing process. So I'd like Sam's memories of Philip to be a part of the garden. David and the boys are racing to finish the cedar deck around the new hot tub. Now it needs an outdoor dining table. It's an absolutely massive olive tree.
I could only guess at the age of that, but I'd say over 100. Louvered screens.
Inspired by a husband and father's final wishes, and two boys, Ethan and Josh, and special features for each of them to enjoy.
Open your eyes.
Now, these programs go out to millions of people. Just imagine how many people watched that program that had had a relative die recently. They're going to feel quite guilty that they didn't do that. So what I think they're doing here is trying to get people to spend as much money on funerals as they do on weddings, right? So I can update my chart now. There's stuff I need to buy that I need, stuff I buy that I want, and stuff to buy for dead people. A whole new marketplace has opened up. Salespeople will be having orgasms, won't they? Now, my dad died recently, okay? And I can tell you something for sure, my mother is not getting a hot tub in her back garden. It's louvered screens and a 100-year-old olive tree. So here's an article in the Daily Express all about that TV program. And just below the article, we have an advert for loans. So they're trying to get you to borrow money to buy things for dead people. I guess we're about out of ideas on this crazy planet. Alan Titmarsh.